Dun, 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 dun. All right, I think we're live. There are
Hello.
no eyeballs on us yet. We are live. So we're going to
Yes.
wait. We're going to let the crowd gather. We're going to let the voices
Yes.
swell. And then when at least two people are watching, we're going to launch this thing. Gary, where are you? Because I'm not going to start
Uh-huh.
until Gary shows up. Hey, what's going on?
So,
I can hear
so
David playing it on his phone.
No, it was my phone, so it's cool, man.
We got
I,
one
I,
person watching. I think that's
I
David.
I want to share
yeah,
the live link. I can't find it.
Well, you got to go on the Come and Live page. What's up? We
I
got
am
two
on it.
people.
I am.
We got two people. We got two people. No comments yet.
Oh, welcome everybody.
Welcome, everybody. So this is a live stream, an actual live stream of the Provoke and Inspire podcast. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today, but we're just waiting here to get started because we want people to watch. Now there's 5 of you watching. Are you guys ready? Should we start the episode?
We're ready.
I'm trying
Yes.
to find it. I want to share it, but I don't see how to do it.
I found it.
You found it? Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah.
For those people that have watched this, they're watching this right now. They're like, why am I doing this? So we got to hurry up.
No, you guys have to help us. Help us
Steve's
by
gonna-
sharing it.
And Steve's going to share it on our community page. He's going to do that right now. All right, I think we need to do this, people, because this is going to be increasingly awkward for those watching. But it does prove that it is indeed live. The reason you can't find it is because of all the things pinned to the top. All right, share now. Okay, I'm going. You ready, boys? Here we go.
I'm
Yeah.
ready.
Good? Are we good?
I hope so.
Welcome to the Provoke and Inspire podcast. David is looking a little off center there. I'm not sure why.
I don't know, man. I'm having a hard time. And it's like 3 a.m. for me. So no one takes that into
And you're never very
consideration.
centered anyway.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
and you're never very centered anyway, are you, David? Why be centered?
Yeah. No, it's good. This is good. This gives us all the ability to practice to stay within our limits, both symbolically and literally. Because for those watching the live stream, and for those who will watch it later, we have this narrow little frame with which to live.
I know it's
within.
weird. It's like
It's David.
It's like
Yeah.
having an imaginary box boxing you in.
And David has never been he's never been fond of boxes. We all know
that's
that.
true. That's true.
This is the Provoke and Inspire podcast, calling followers of Jesus to radical faith outside of the church. We're so thankful that you would join us today. We got a great podcast for you. Hello, Ton. Ton.
Antonius.
Yeah, he says, I'm still alive.
Ton is
All
alive.
of us have wondered. There's been a raffle out there. And let's just say I didn't win the meat. Anyway, so this is the Provoke and Inspire podcast. Like I said, calling followers of Jesus to radical faith outside of the church. We have a great podcast for you today, including a discussion around the coronavirus, the dreaded virus that is infecting the planet and sending us into a wild panic. David, the question everyone wants to know is, are you okay?
I'm not sure. I think I'm okay.
Can you stay in frame?
I am in frame.
It's not that hard.
I am in frame.
So you didn't
I don't
really
have
answer
a.
the question.
I'm not like Luke. I don't have a bolt in the back of my head attaching me to the wall.
So
Hey, Eric.
Eric Geary just said, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I feel like I should know, but I never really called you by your full name. Anyway, him and I go way back because we occupied the hashtag Dude Shack many years ago. But
Oh, I saw that.
yeah, that place was crusty. But as I kindly said to him on the Provoke and Inspire community page on Facebook, what happened at the Dude Shack stays at the Dude Shack because there are secrets there that shall forever remain hidden within those tiny walls in that crusty shack that may or may not still be standing because the foundations were a touch, let's say, feeble, to say the least. Anyway,
On the other hand, Eric, I invite you to share one secret from the Dude Shack every week on a Provoke and Inspire group. That would just be wonderful for all of us.
Oh, yeah. No. Some things are better left unspoken.
No.
Smell it from a distance. So, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the coronavirus. But before we do that, we have...
Random story.
My fingers are kind of fat, apparently.
So anyway, I sometimes, you'll see something that makes you think of something else. So I was out the other day and I saw this guy in rollerblading, and it made me think of Luke.
I think that.
Yes, I did used to rollerblade. That is actually accurate.
Tiny
Yeah.
baskets,
Yeah, and
tiny
it does.
dogs, and
Yeah.
fruit-colored shirts. That always makes me think of Luke.
Yeah, he had the guy had like silver hair and he was rollerblading, shirtless. And
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
thought,
Everything so far is accurate.
and so he's like rollerblading, and it brought me back to Luke and his love affair with Alice Cooper. I know many of you don't realize that Luke has kind of a thing for Alice Cooper. Did you? Yeah,
It's
and
awkward.
it is awkward, and I don't judge him for it. You know, I mean, who am I
Thank
to
you,
judge?
David.
We're all just
Yeah.
wooden vessels trying to be polished along the
You know,
way.
and I mean, we're on a journey, and you know, I think Anya's helped Luke with that. But so he's always had this thing. Anya's his Polish wife, for those of you that don't know, and
Yes.
that's why he always has
Important
lots of.
information.
Luke
He has
has been
all-
a crusty scab. With
That's
the
why
balm
Luke
of life
always-
soothing him along the way.
That's why Luke always has lots of fresh chicken because of that, and I know Antonius would
Exactly.
back me up. So he loves Alice Cooper, and so we were in Minneapolis before we got rid of Luke. He used to be our drummer until we finally were able to get rid of him. But
yeah, which was another interesting story. It's very clever.
Yeah.
You know, David told me to start another band, and everybody was going to start a new band. And then when I
Yeah.
started mine, then he just continued on with No Longer Music.
yeah, that's so
That's
Luke,
how he kicked me out.
well, you kind of set up the whole thing here because so Alice Cooper was playing this outdoor show in Minneapolis, and we were doing rehearsals, and so Luke was going to start his new band, Zombie Apocalypse Boy Rangers. So He wanted
It's the,
Alice-
what is it?
uh,
Post fem rock. I think it's what. It's
yeah,
called.
it's Femster Rock they call it. So
Mm.
it's he was like so excited about his new band, and so Alice was playing in this. What's the name of that? It's like in Minneapolis. It's like on an island. But remember that show?
It was
All
like
right.
a weird little
With it.
fair,
So
like a family fair.
So anyway, so we're all there at the show, and incidentally, I didn't think Alice's stage effects were that great. To be, they
Mm.
thought they were kind of, well, I
Yeah.
won't say- yeah,
We expected more, didn't we?
yeah. But so anyway, after the show, Luke's going, I have to talk to Alice. I have to give him a signed copy of my CD, Zombie Apocalypse.
No,
Boy Rangers.
no, it was
So
your
he
book.
runs-
I wanted to
So
give him your
wait a
book.
minute, wait a minute. So he runs up to the
Liar.
he runs up to the stage to give him his his autographed copy of the Zombie Apocalypse Boy Rangers suit thing, and for whatever reason Alice would not talk to him after the show. And
I'm fairly certain he did not have access to Alice after the show because. As
Yeah,
Wayne
you did.
told- No, as Wayne.
I
Wells
got pretty
taught us,
close.
Lots.
yeah,
of
he
his
did. This is
girlfriends are
all
in there.
true. And so then because of this connection that Luke had, we asked Chad who's if he could get Alice on our podcast. So Chad contacted Alice Cooper's agent and said, hey, you want to be on the Provoke and Inspire podcast? And then Alice came and says, oh, I don't do podcasts because I'm so whatever. And so now I hate Alice Cooper, just like I hate Francis Chan. And that is the random story.
Oh, man.
Wow.
When
That's
I'm,
weird. I just want to say that not all the opinions expressed on this podcast are shared by the three of us. I don't hate anybody.
Oh, I know
And
you
Alice
don't.
Cooper.
It's-
Oh man.
oh,
Now,
notice
now I will make
Luke
I will make
doesn't
just
hate-
one
Luke
correction.
doesn't hate anybody.
Okay.
Now,
Mm,
I
can you
will
repeat
just
the
make
part
one
of the stuff
correction
where you
to
said
that
all about
story.
the things?
I think
What?
that's Homer Simpson.
The things?
So anyway, I will make one correction to that story, and it is that I did run after Alice Cooper in
See?
Minneapolis. In fact,
See?
I rode a bicycle for an hour and a half with Philip Shorey, the guy who has the
Vampire.
Vampire Orchestra. So we rode a bicycle for an hour and a half trying to get Alice Cooper, and but what we were trying to give him was a signed copy of Rock Priest. There was
Oh, I
no
love-
such CD that I had at the time. It was David Pierce's book Rock Priest because I thought who else should read it but Alice Cooper, right? So just that correction.
Yeah, his rock project with the boyish charm was yet undeveloped. It was
Exactly.
pubescent still, if you will.
Yeah, but Alice wouldn't have anything to do with you, man.
Yeah.
That's true.
No, it's
But
probably
maybe
best.
if he could see my new album that's just come out now, maybe he would talk to me then.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
not, too.
Let's let's
Yeah.
hope he's still rocking when that moment arrives. Anyway, moving along. That was
David's random stories.
so. One way that you can help out this podcast is with a rating and/or reviewing. Now, if you're watching this live, and 7 of you were, now more of you were before David's random story. The viewers plummeted. People got snacks. They took showers. They took their dogs on walks. Anything basically to bring some sanity back to their lives. But if you would come back and have not yet rated or reviewed this podcast, would you do that for us? You can do that on iTunes. I know I discriminate. Some of you listen on one of those weird non-Apple devices. I don't even know what those are. I don't even want to name them out loud. Apparently, my mic needs to go up, which I don't know how to do that because I think I'm already pretty loud, right, Gabe? Does my mic need to come up? Can anybody hear me?
I can hear
I
you.
hear you.
don't
I hear
even
you good.
understand. Hold on. Let's just do this. You know what, people? We're going to do a little on-air production. We're just going to... Oh, I got an idea.
Oh, that's louder.
How about now? I want to
That's
get
good.
I want to get a thumbs up if I'm louder. I'm sorry if I wasn't louder, but now I think I am. Anyway, rate or review this podcast on iTunes. Go on, give us a 5-star review, or at least just do it. Like, even if it's, scathing and critical, so we can learn. But we did get a review recently on February 29th by Kara W. Lena 116. And she says, my husband and I love listening to this podcast. It is edifying and entertaining at the same time. ... exclamation mark. It really does provoke and inspire, living up to its name. I introduced this to my husband, and now it's one of his favorite podcast channels. I went to a Come and Live conference back in 2012-13. Wow, in Tampa. And I think it was called Spread the Love Conference. That sounds like Chad.
Mhm.
And then she writes, thank you for doing this, grace and peace.
Wow,
How
that's
about
cool.
that, fellas?
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's
Love that. Thank you for that review. That was very encouraging.
Salute to you.
the Sped and Love
Spread the love.
conference?
Yeah, the speed and love contest.
Spread and love. If Chad was on the podcast now, he would also not hate anyone. He would just spread the love.
He would. All right, transitioning. So, wow, that in 2020, that's a risky way to. So David looks at me. Oh, what are you gonna do? It's the foibles of our age, is it not, folks? Hold on.
I don't want to be a missionary, man.
Anyway, so what we're going to talk about today is the dreaded coronavirus, or as I titled this live stream, "Pass me a coronavirus, baby." I thought you would like
Wow.
that, David. What?
What? No,
Silence?
yeah, what, Luke? Yeah, what is it, Luke?
I don't know. It's a good
You
play
guys-
on words.
You guys need to be more sensitive.
Luke,
What's-
what is it with Luke today? In his forehead, have you noticed his forehead is more translucent?
What I heard, but here, let me just explain the title a little bit today. What I heard on the radio this morning is that there actually was a fairly substantial percentage of the U.S. population, and perhaps globally, but let's be honest, probably the U.S. population, that actually thought there was a legitimate tie between the coronavirus and the beer Corona.
Yes,
and so-
Americans. Americans.
USA.
Okay. Can you repeat the part of the stuff where you said all about the things?
And it turns out that there is
the
no connection
things?
there. And so that initially their stock prices plummeted, only to have regained form. And probably they'll ultimately benefit from the association. Although it would be weird to have your product so closely linked. It's not like, oh no, I got the Gatorade rash.
Well, and also,
I must say, it was very
Oh.
funny. Over in Europe, they were talking about that. The Americans stopped drinking coronavirus because they thought it was related. That is hilarious, guys.
Yeah,
they
that's a little
stopped
bad.
drinking. They sold a lot more limes after that too, apparently.
They did. Anyway, so I thought this was a necessary thing to talk about because, needless to say, we live in an era of mass hysteria, and it seems that there is always something that is threatening us. And I do think, in all seriousness, I think that it's an interesting look at human culture, at our psyche as sort of a globe. And I think it says a lot about how quickly things spread. Obviously, pun intended, both the virus itself, but also information, and the good and bad of that. But I also just think it says a lot about what our culture becomes obsessed with, and how in an age where, we face many dangers, and we're fragile as human beings, that we have become so obsessed with this particular virus at this particular time. And so, David, as our resident medical expert, hold on, I got a little bit of a glitch going on here, and that's going to make it awkward. So let's try that again. Sorry, live streamers. This is the real stuff you're experiencing. So, David, as our resident medical expert, what do you make of this? In all seriousness, what do you make of our global culture, our obsession with the coronavirus? Give us some initial gut thoughts, and then I have some bullet points I want to react to.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I've looked into it a little bit. I mean, as a layman could, and it seems like it's not more deadly than the flu, from what I can tell. And like these other viruses that have come out, like the SARS and I can't remember what the other one was. But I get the reason I'm saying that is I used to go to India a lot. And Antonius, if you're still on, you'll know what I'm talking about, because Antonius had to work there helping destitute people, and Luke has been there as well, who were dying under the bridges and stuff. And I can remember going with Ton into a hospital there where people had drug-resistant tuberculosis. So like this is really, really deadly drug-resistant tuberculosis. And I'm in this hospital in India, and so it's pretty rough, to say the least. And I'm walking around, and everyone has these face masks on. Everyone is like dressed with these hardcore face masks, except for me and Ton. And I'm like, Antonius, and I'm like, what the heck? And I'm going, why are we not wearing face masks? And he's like, oh, we're okay. And Jesus wants us to be here, and we don't have to be all worried about this, because these people need they need to know that someone loves them and cares about them. And I just thought, now, maybe that was a little extreme, and maybe we should have had on some kind of protection. I don't know. But I think the spirit of what Antonius was talking about is really something that this should be our reaction to crisis when we are Jesus followers. Not let's go run and hide somewhere, but how can we go to where this is happening and let people know that there is hope, that Jesus is the answer? And I don't know if am I going off on a tangent?
Yeah, well,
you
you didn't go as sequentially as I would have hoped, but what are you going to do?
Sorry.
No, I think the thing that's interesting to me,
You didn't follow script.
Yeah, well, not necessarily, but that's okay. We're live here, so we've got to stick to that theme. So, I think it's interesting to me that there's so many angles of this. I mean, one of them is that there is the idea of what are we actually dealing with here, and depending on your circumstances, if you're single or if you're married or if you have kids, it hits you kind of in a different way. Maybe I think when the swine flu hit. Remember when the swine flu hit? Nate on our band actually. He actually had that for like 2 weeks during rehearsals.
Yeah.
Do you remember that, Luke? That's
I remember.
I have to say that as a parent, this hits me.
You don't
a little
remember
bit
that, Luke?
Yeah, don't.
Yeah, I do. I was there.
No, you don't.
All right.
Yeah, I do.
I can't tell if David's actually calling him out or if he's just being contentious self. You just never know. But I have to say, as a parent, this does hit you a little bit different, right? Because when you have young kids, especially, I have a 19-month-old and a 4-year-old. I think it does freak you out a little bit more. But I think in a non-spiritual sense, I think it is kind of funny, because if you look at it, I mean, why is it this? Why have we decided to be so obsessed with this particular thing? I mean, there's so many things, the fragility that is around us, as human beings, where we can be so arrogant and forgetting how fragile we really are. I mean, the people that are so concerned with the coronavirus are at far greater risk every time they get in their car, statistically, than they'll ever be affected by this virus. I mean, even according to a lot of the research I've done, that just your standard influenza is 20 times more likely to kill you. It kills 20 times more people, they predict, than this will. Around 95% of the cases are really isolated to one specific place. Of course, that could change. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that we become so obsessed. And I think part of that, Luke, don't you think, is that we have an entire media system that is incentivized to exaggerate. I mean, I was talking about the other day, like, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, when you subscribed to a particular newspaper, you were subscribing to that newspaper, and you weren't being sold headline to headline. You weren't clicking on a specific article within a specific website. You just kind of trusted that news outlet, and you'd read it every day or once a week or whatever, and you'd get your information. But now it feels like there's so many sources of news that they have to compete for you constantly, that you could go in any number of a million directions. And do you think part of this is just, it's our media that we live in, that we live in an era where they're actually incentivized to exaggerate this because it sells more?
Yeah. I guess if you're saying that it's something that the media is using because that's what people are interested in right now and they're worried about it, so it sells well, I get that point. I think that's accurate. I think it would be important, like, just first to, when I've been observing this, I've had mixed feelings, because on one side, I want to just recognize that there are places where this is being a real issue, not the illness so much in itself, but what people are having to do because of the illness. And so I guess the part of the issue or the reaction people have is because it's new and we don't know what to expect, and they're trying to figure it out, and so it scares people. And because of that scare, it creates this whole situation with people, having to be in lockdown and people having to stay in their homes. And like, I remember watching this one video early on where it was the inhabitants of Wuhan, China, where the coronavirus first had its outbreak. And there were people singing songs to each other from one building to the other, because they were lonely, because they had to stay in their homes for days on end. They couldn't go out to work and they couldn't go to the streets. And so people were yelling at each other from like one block of the street to the other and singing songs just so they could have some like contact, so they could have some, relationship somehow and feel like they're not on their own. So there's some really hard situations that people are going through, because of the scare. And then there's also a bunch of people just really freaking out about it and really worried about it. And it affects almost everybody. Like, people are talking about it. Even my wife's going like, oh, do you think it will come to Poland? And in Poland, they haven't had any cases yet. So it's kind of like Poland's too isolated. But so it affects people in this big way. And then, so that's one feeling I have. It's like, okay, there's that going on. But then on the other hand, I agree with what you guys are saying. It is weird that it's become such a hype. I think one of the reasons is what you're pointing out, Ben, that it is something that the news is pushing because that's what people are interested in. But I think one of the reasons people are interested in it's because it can potentially affect anybody. It can affect us, and especially where the media is driven. I mean, I don't know, in the US, you guys have the media that's talking about it right now. I listen to the BBC News a lot, and they're talking about it lots. And it's not every day that a virus can affect the US or the UK or places like that where these media platforms are. It's, sometimes you get these deadly viruses spreading somewhere like Africa, and it's way worse. And yes, they'll report on it, but it's not as prominent because it's not affecting everybody. And people unfortunately aren't that interested. And so because everybody's so interested, this could affect me, it could affect my family. So they start, looking for it and searching it on the internet, and soon all media platforms, that's all they talk about. And one thing leads to another. So I think there is that going on, and it is unfortunate because I think it just scares people more, freaks people out.
Yeah. And before we kind of get into the more, the general idea for me is, what does it say about humanity? What does it say about our media system? What does it say about globalization, and how quickly things spread? Of course, globalization has come with some good, like we can use those tools to spread the gospel, but also we kind of live in these weird, these micro hysterias. I don't know if that's a term or not, but it's like, it's this thing, and then 3 days later it's something else, and then it's something else. The news shortens so much. So I kind of want to talk about that and the general, what this says in general about humanity, but then drill down maybe to what the Christian response should be. But to your point, before we get into that, it is really kind of sad that we only care because it can affect us. Now, some might say that that's just human nature.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, if you think about how sad that is. I remember when I was first reflecting on this, I thought I was just curious, how many people a day die of starvation. So I just Googled it. And so I'm not saying that this is really like detailed academic research, but the basic research I did, it says 25,000 people a day die from starvation. That a day, every single day, there are going to be 25,000 people who die because they don't have enough food to eat. You think about how many people are dying of malaria and typhoid and curable diseases and lack of clean drinking water. And what does it say about us that as humans, that we only care about something when it's self-interested, when it could potentially affect us? We can't contain hunger at borders like we can a flu. And so in a weird way, if this can create a bit of commonality, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? In a weird sort of way, it detaches us from the illusion of our invincibility. But it should also, as you said, David, with your story about India, it should make us realize that there are places in the world, they're always wondering how they're going to get through the day. They never know, how they're going to even provide the basics, let alone survive some flu that statistically is way less likely to kill you than the same common flu that hits us every single day. So, what do you think what do you think about that, David? This general lack of concern, because if it doesn't affect me, I'm not going to care.
It's interesting. I was so convicted when we talked to Shane Claiborne last podcast, last week. And how Jesus said in Matthew 25:40, truly I tell you, whatever you did to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you've done for me. And that was a favorite verse of Mother Teresa. And she thought when she was with the poor and reaching out to the most destitute person, she was reaching out to Jesus. That was something she was famous for saying. And I was thinking, man, how am I doing that? I mean, I have over the years in some ways supported these kinds of really the people that are the least of these, as is described by Jesus there. But it just makes me think, like you're saying, Ben, if it affects me, then I'm concerned, but then the whole world can be, thousands of people can be dying, and it doesn't,
And
because
millions.
it doesn't, millions. Yeah. So on a personal level, I've been just asking, Jesus, what more should I be doing, or what do I need to do personally? And also I've been thinking about us as a mission, and what do we need to be doing personally? But this coronavirus has affected us as a mission. I mean, we have some, one of our workers is planning on going to South Korea and Japan, in a couple of weeks. And and so he was really saying, what do I do? And but his reason for not, he wants to go, but so it's not about running away from where the crisis is, but it's like, man, we have to go. This is like a window of opportunity. If ever people needed to know about Jesus, and we needed to go to places that are affected by this, even though it's like you said, Ben, it's not like the Black Plague. We need to go to them, and then someone could look at me, I'm in New Zealand right now, and they'd say, stay in New Zealand. You know what I mean? Until this thing is done, stay here, my wife and I, Jody and I, should stay here for the next 6 months and just wait for the virus to go away, the dreaded virus, and then go. But it's like, no, we don't know how much time we have. And if we know Jesus, we need to be, we can take risks. We should be willing to go to places where people, and even if this fear of the virus is overblown, they're still afraid, and they're still, and so we need, so I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Luke, trying to drill down more to the, of course, as this podcast is how to follow Jesus faithfully, radically outside of the church. What should the Christian response be to situations like this? I remember I was reading a book, and it was a young guy who had correspondence with C.S. Lewis, and his name was Sheldon Vonnegut, and he loses his wife actually at a young age, and he goes through this horrible period of grief. But there was this distinct point in the book where, you know, they're young, they're putting their lives together, and then World War II hits, and
Mm.
everything changes. And I remember being so struck reading this book, thinking, I have never in my life experienced a geopolitical event that has taken everyone I know and everything we're doing and just stopped it. Like,
Mm.
nope, you were going to do that? Nope. Like, this was your plan for your life? Nope. You know, the whole world just shifts. And now suddenly
Yeah.
everything is consumed by just this imposing geopolitical event. And I remember just feeling so much gratitude for that. Like, how little of my life ever gets disrupted. But
Mhm.
so whether it ends up being this or something else, because something's going to come eventually, right? It's going to really disrupt us in a truly global pandemic world crisis sense. What is this? How can we use this to prepare? What should the attitude and the heart of a follower of Jesus be when we encounter something like this?
Well, I think first of all, our reaction needs to be different to what we generally see happen in society when stuff like this comes around. It's like, you know, how it says we shouldn't be conformed by the world. We should be renewing our minds. And I think that as a follower of Jesus, first of all, a big difference between how my mindset, I think, should be biblically and as a follower of Jesus and that of the world is we're in a state of war as followers of Jesus. In a sense, we recognize that the world is in crisis, even if it's not physically, spiritually in crisis, but also recognizing that it is physically in crisis, and that therefore our lives are. There are so many aspects of the gospel that are urgent, and our lives need to be driven by those things, and recognizing that life is not as society tries to paint it or media tries to paint it, that I should be trying to just find the most comfortable situation to be in and to find this dream or this ambition that I'm going to, you know, gradually follow after and find stability and have all these nice things and maybe live the best life I can. That's what society is painting for us. That's the picture they're giving us. And as followers of Jesus, we should be, whether there's a coronavirus hitting or a war or whatever, we should be aware of the reality we live in where people are spiritually hungry. If they don't meet Jesus, they have no hope, where this world is broken because of the lack of God, the lack of Jesus and of his light in it. And so I should be dedicating my life to bring change, whether it's in crisis or not. So for me, that's the starting point. I'm in a different place to somebody who hasn't met Jesus yet. I should be. My mindset should be. And then when a crisis hits, I should therefore react differently. First of all, on one hand, it's not so much a shock. It shouldn't be so much a shock to us than it is to other people, because that's, you know, the mindset that we get stuck in of comfort that gets shocked when something happens. Well, I shouldn't be in that place as a follower of Jesus. I shouldn't be living just a comfortable life. So I think my reaction should be different. I should be going like, okay, yeah, this is another thing, but it's part of the real world I live in. The Bible's warned me and told me about these things. And then I should be able to react differently as well and do something about it based on the character that Jesus gives us and teaches us. How can I love people in those situations? How can I speak into those situations? How can I bring change? And so then as followers of Jesus, we should be allowing that to influence us and to guide us. And so I think it's going back to what David was saying, like, how can I go into those places and bring Jesus' love in those times and not be affected by it? I'm not going to, you know, similar to David saying he's in New Zealand, like Anya and I plan to go across Germany in a couple of weeks' time to one of our trainings that we do as a mission. And we've, like Anya's family has said, no, you shouldn't go now because that area's got more coronavirus and etc. And we can't let our lives be driven by this stuff. We have to react differently to it.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think that the biggest opportunities come in crisis for the, you know,
Yeah.
so it's, you know, we need to not have a human recklessness. You know, I don't really have a lot of, you know, how some people, they hang off cliffs and stuff, they risk their lives doing stuff like that. And everyone says, oh, they're such a hero. You know, they're climbing a cliff without any ropes. And I just think, yeah, whatever, you know, it's just an adrenaline junkie, I think. You know,
Right.
I don't think there's anything noble about that, actually. but I think there is something noble about Doctors Without Borders. You know, these guys,
Right.
these courageous doctors that go into places that are all these deadly viruses and diseases, and are actually literally risking their lives to save people where other people are afraid to go. I think that's what I want to be like. And I think I've really missed out sometimes because, I mean, not to use an example, I was going to be going do something in Cuba, in Havana, and I was in Florida, and there was a hurricane that was bearing down on that region, and so I was like, should I go? Shouldn't I go? And everyone, everyone was advising me not to go, and I didn't, and I was so regret it, because I think if there ever was a time for me to go to Cuba, is when it was then, and I've usually responded in the right way with those kinds of opportunities, but that's an example where I didn't, and I feel like we need to go into these places. It also makes me think of back in the, I don't know, Y2K, if those that can remember that, when everyone thought they were,
That dates us. Yep. The
yeah,
bean collecting era.
right. Like our vacuum cleaners would stop working and the whole society would close down because of this. It's so
Or at least to be
stupid.
very dusty.
Exactly. And maybe a lot of our listeners don't remember that because you're too young, but that's cool. But what I liked about it is some people from our team, they went to Times Square in New York when Y2K, when the new year clicked over. And I thought, that's where we want to be. We want to be right in the epicenter of things, boldly talking about Jesus. And when I have not responded, when I have run away from things like that Cuba example, that's when I have regrets. But when I've gone into the battle, and I think you guys, we, all three of us, we were in Southeast Turkey when they had a state of emergency, when it was like really crazy to be there. But man, those are some of the best times we've ever had, is when we've gone where people are in crisis. That's where the gospel needs to be brought, whether it's a health crisis or a political crisis. As followers of Jesus, we shouldn't be hiding in the mountains, homeschooling our kids. We should be where the people are, in the mud. That's where we need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that this is not an unusual moment of chaos. This is reality. Like, we're always at risk. We're always fragile. We're always desperately dependent on Jesus. Our entire globe is always on the brink of ruins. In fact, it's amazing it even holds together as it is. You put 8 billion greedy, self-focused, fallen human beings together, nuclear bombs. And, I'm not old enough to have really lived through the sort of the hard times of the Cold War, but even a lot of people, like, there were eras where we wondered if we'd make it through the day, where where the whole world wasn't going to be blown up. And so I think that it's funny, because I think it's similar to when someone dies, we have that momentary shock. And it's almost like the layers are peeled back and we can kind of see
Put things into perspective.
Right. Yeah. And you kind of live differently, don't you? You kind of appreciate little things better. I'm sure people who have been through real, near-death experiences could attest to this more than I could, but you kind of have this different sense of things. And then what happens? You slowly get sucked back in, and you become kind of isolated to it all, and everything's fine. And it's weird. It's like the default state of the fallen heart is just to be kind of in the matrix, is to just not think that you're ever going to really be affected by anything. And so I think we need to look at these moments and to say, man, God, let this urgency not fade. Let my arrogance really die. Let my sense of fragility, in the right sense of the word, be prominent, so that I don't waste my life, so that I don't, we just think we get so wrapped up in our insurance and on our seatbelts and on our dental plans. We forget that we can't control hardly anything. And in a global phenomenon like this, I think reminds us of that.
It's funny.
Well, that's right. That's what I was.
I have to just say this quick, Luke, because Ben, you brought up, we had caught up in our seatbelts, and it reminded me of when the three of us were in Beirut, and we were going down a mountain, and the brakes went out in the van.
Oh yeah.
And so we're going down this mountain in this. I mean, it was really, really crazy. But we're in this van where the brakes actually went out, and so the guy is like, literally, it was. I thought we're not going to.
What it would be? Okay, let me paint the picture for you. It's
All right.
similar to
Yeah.
when in Cool Running, when Sanka is going down the hill
Cool
in his
Running
push
again.
car, and he ultimately is unable to control the speed, and he goes headlong into a cart with conveniently placed chickens and all sorts of things that made loud movie-like sounds in for comic relief.
However, this was not a movie; it was real.
Yeah.
And so,
Right. And there are no
And so-
chickens around.
So I was in the front seat with this crazy Lebanese guy. So he and I both had seatbelts, but no one else did. And actually, Luke was, I don't know where you were. Like you were saying, maybe you should. No, I didn't have my seatbelt on. And he goes,
Yeah.
you said to me, maybe you should put your seatbelt on. You know,
Right.
And I thought, no. So I thought, I can't have my seatbelt on if the rest of the band doesn't. So I didn't put my seatbelt on. Just
Because
I
only you
thought-
had a seatbelt.
only I had a seatbelt. And I thought, how lame
Yeah.
would that be? I'm the only one that survived. So,
Hey, and let me tell you,
I don't
this.
know what that has to do with anything, but it made me think of it.
If I'm ever in a situation where I'm on a plane and that sucker is going down, no, I will not put my seatbelt on, nor shall I put my feet in the brace position. I will
No.
unfurl the seatbelt. Perhaps I will even shed a few layers of clothes. And I'm going to just go out dancing in the aisles like it's raining out and it's 1996.
Yeah, it's like put your feet firmly on the ground. Like
It's like,
that.
heck no. I'm not going to spend my last few minutes with my knees between my legs, like whispering quietly. Like, forget that. Let me answer this question because it's kind of a statement / question, and it's from Sarah Elizabeth Arnold. And essentially, I mean, I can check it up here on the screen. It's pretty long, so this will be an experiment. Boom. It's basically like, look, I get that I shouldn't be afraid, but I am afraid. Like it's a real thing. I know it kind of awkwardly blocks our faces, so I'll get it off here. But essentially, it's like, what do I do? I don't want to be afraid. I know we're not supposed to be afraid, but I am afraid. Luke, what do you say in response to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think you do what we've all been doing, which is having a read up and getting to know and understand it a bit more. And we've kind of tried to jump into something deeper philosophical in the discussion here. But when you read up the stuff about it, it's for me, it's a bit funny that they're always saying the same thing. We're bringing, I was listening to the UK Prime Minister yesterday. We're bringing the best information to people to be prepared for the coronavirus. And the best piece of information that they always give is wash your hands. And it's just, it's a really obvious thing that I don't know why we have to tell all these adults to wash their hands. I hope everybody does usually wash their hands.
The key is to create a circular pattern with your palms.
Yeah.
And you have to sing the entire chorus of It's Raining Men.
Right. Exactly. Well, I heard the other day, what was it? Somebody said you have to wash your hands for 20 seconds. And I was like, oh man, okay. I tried it out. I was like, okay, let me see how. So I started and I was like, man, 20 seconds is a long time. My hands are really tired after trying to wash my hands for 20 seconds.
Sorry, this is a serious question. My bad.
No, it is. It is. But I think the point is, yes, it is good to read up about what it is, how it affects us, and what we should be doing. That's what everybody should do, for sure. Should we be careful? Yes. If there's an outbreak in our area, in our neighborhood, we have to be careful. They're putting people on lockdown for a reason. They don't know what the virus is like. They don't want it to spread everywhere. They don't want everybody to get sick. And one interesting thing is the majority of the people that are dying are elderly people or people that have some kind of health problem already. Very few children have been affected by it. And I think that out of care, for the elderly community, let's not make this thing spread, without reason. So I appreciate the efforts that are being made by the China government, by the World Health Organization. They're doing every effort they can to try to keep this thing under control, and that's awesome and that's good. And so I don't think in any sense we're trying to say don't worry or don't read or don't care about it. No, yeah, it's good. But I think the point we're making is when we have everything into perspective, as followers of Jesus, the coronavirus is one small piece of a bigger issue and crisis all around us. the reality of the world that we live in right now. And when your life's in God's hands, he knows when you're going to go. And yet I think, some of the comments we've made in the stories David's told is also, let's not be cavalier or just do something to be stupid. Let's be careful. But I really believe this shouldn't take over us as much as it seems to be taking over the media and society right now. I really don't think we should live in fear because of this virus. I think we should keep doing what Jesus is calling us to do, and not let the hype of it take over fear in that sense.
So look, what you're saying in essence is that you want to not get the virus so you don't pass it on to me because you think I'm elderly. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that was part of Ben's hint at the beginning when he said, David, the big question is, how are you doing?
So, I mean, if you want to just say, you can say it to me directly. And as far as the question about fear, I think we need a revelation of who we are. I mean, I don't know if I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I apologize if I am. But when we had an earthquake here recently, it sounded like a freight train was going through the house. It was so loud. It was that's what made it more scary than normal earthquakes that we have here in New Zealand. But it literally felt like a freight train was going through our house. It was so loud. And people on our community here around here saying, yeah, it was like you could feel the creator, the power of the creator. And it made me think about how we need, our neighbors, most of them are atheists, but they were like, wow, the power of God is what they were saying. And I think I need an understanding of the fact that I'm a son or I'm a daughter of the one who holds the universe together with his power. What am I going to, and this isn't my planet. I'm only here I'm a visitor. I'm a foreigner. And so I'm not going to let a little virus or a big virus stop me from doing what God wants me to do. And I'm not going to be governed by the same fears. And again, I'm a human, of course. And it's easy to say that, when you're not going through crisis directly, but I have been in some difficult times. And I can tell you that it's important that you see yourself correctly and accurately, so that when something like this happens, you don't respond like the rest of the world in fear, but you can be bold and you can have confidence. And I'm a son or a daughter of the one of the creator. Why do I respond in the same way as everybody else?
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is the exact right context to apply this, so someone can call me out. By the way, Dirk just keeps hammering David for his homeschool comments.
What?
Dirk wants to know if you're afraid of homeschoolers, which the obvious answer
wait,
is
well,
yes.
let me answer, Dirk. Let me answer that question. Of course. Come on. Why are you asking such an obvious question? Aren't you afraid of them?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I don't know if this is the exact right way to apply this, but I think in 1 Peter 3:15, it says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason of the hope that is in you." And to me, I think something that the way this conversation has evolved, a lot of it is about we shouldn't be like the rest of the world. And in fact, our response in the midst of crisis speaks to the resilience of our worldview. No wonder when you think that all you are is a highly evolved animal, that the universe doesn't care, that something like a virus is very much part of just the natural process that will come in, take you out, and the world goes on. Who cares? There's no ultimate meaning to your life. You're here one day, gone the next. It would be scary, right? It'd be scary to live in that kind of reality, and that's totally understandable. But there should be something different in us. And I think you've seen in history Christians rise above and stand up to things and stand up to tyranny. And, we've done our share of bad things too. That's part of being fallen human beings. But, I think of the monks running into the plagues in the Middle Ages. I think of all these different situations where they stepped up.
Can you expand on that? Can you expand on that, Ben?
Well, I mean, there's just, obviously when the Black Plague was sweeping through Europe and killing, risking literally the extinction of mankind, and everyone was running. And we're talking about something off the charts worse than the coronavirus. There's famed stories of monks and the early church being in there, being in that mess, being there, nursing people back to health, often at the expense of their own lives. And to me, I think that this is a unique opportunity for the resilience of our Christian perspective to come forward. But God is also aware of our human nature. I mean, there's a reason why the Bible hundreds of times says, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. I mean, it is one of the most overemphasized parts of Scripture, because I think the enemy loves to use fear to keep us conservative and self-focused and inward and isolated and away from the world. And I think that the enemy would not be trying so hard to make us afraid if our courage was not so powerful in the hands of a God that could use us in the midst of crisis.
But how do we,
that's good.
so when we have fearful thoughts, then what is the antidote to that? How do you just go, I'm not going to be afraid? How do you not be afraid? How do you not have fear?
I think it's true courage is, first of all, a decision, not a feeling, right? We've talked a lot about that on this podcast. Every time I've done things that have been hard, it's not because I felt courageous, like some emotion has come up within me. I think it's a decision to act a certain way based on what you know to be true about reality. But I think ultimately it's about having a revelation of who God is, and that that I think in his presence, fear is driven out. And that ultimately it's not that you're not human. Paul said he, came with much fear and trembling, but his sort of healthy God burden to tell people was so powerful, was so visceral. It mattered so much more that I think he was willing to say, to me, it's kind of like, if you're doing something incredible, right? You're like experiencing something amazing, but you're hungry. That's still a real feeling, but that hunger is easily pushed aside because of the riches of what you're in the middle of, right? If you were like doing something incredible, you'd be like, I can push past that. I think in the same way that ultimately fear is something that is part of the human condition, but our understanding of who God is, our burning heart for his world and the lost, compels us to move beyond and through that fear. But it's a continued thing, right? You don't do it once. You have to keep pushing, because I think the natural proclivity is for us to get drawn back into conservative living, into fear, into isolation. So we have to continue to push in that direction.
And I think it's also about, like, if I feel anxious, normally I need to go on a prayer walk, and I need to, and I need to say, God, I'm anxious, and and remind me of who you are, and speak truth to myself about what it means to be a son, and the relationship I have with Jesus. And also another thing that helps me step through fear is the reason that David could face Goliath is he remember how God helped him with the sheep. So I remind myself of the past where God has been with me and how he's been faithful. And so if you're afraid, this coronavirus thing is making you afraid, I think you need to go back. First of all, you need to probably go and pray and to be honest about it. And then you need to say, okay, and remind yourself how God is faithful, and ask him to give you courage and choose it. It's like you were saying, Ben, it's a decision. Often for me, it's always a decision first, and then the feelings come later. You know what I mean? So it's not, it's
similar to what you're saying. I think what we fill our minds with, and that's part of the issue we are trying to address here, is how much hype the media has put on the coronavirus thing. And so we're constantly hearing about it. And I think that if there's something that is causing you fear, and you just keep feeding yourself with that, with going after, oh, what's the next thing they're saying and what's going on, then it just increases that. And I think that doing what David's saying is taking some time out, spending some time with God, reading his word, renewing our mind, saying, let me get the right perspective here. It's not just what everybody out there is saying. It's what God is saying, what his word is saying, and filling myself with that. And I think that is really important.
Yeah. And it kind of exposes how just fraudulent our YOLO, to use a very dated expression now, kind of mentality is, right? We act like we don't care, like, oh, you only live once, but we totally care, and people are so afraid and so vulnerable, and the invincibility is such a front, right? Because deep down, I think people are they're terrified of the world around them, and control is so easily wrested from them, and then they are thrust into this sense of everything's going to fall apart, and then they become, Netflix is the great opiate of the masses, and so pretty soon we'll forget, something else will take its place. But I would say, as followers of Jesus, let us not go back. Let us spur one another on to be urgent, to realize life is temporary, that we are fragile, that though we have a physical virus that is affecting a lot of people and we need to pray that they recover, there is a spiritual illness that is affecting everyone, and people are going to die of Derp Agent's like, YOLO is so emo. It's not emo. I think it's even post-emo, post-hardcore emo, if you will. We need to recognize that there is a spiritual illness that is affecting everyone, and we need to be urgent in addressing that, right? Because that isn't dependent on washing hands. That is something far deeper than that, and that should be a concern for all followers of Jesus at all times. And I think that's really what my response ultimately is to this situation, regardless of how long it ultimately lasts.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Well, any parting thoughts?
No, I haven't heard from Nigel ever since this whole Corona thing happened. I think he's put himself, but what I've heard is that he found out
might be the end of an era.
he's put himself in some kind of an oxygen chamber. He's completely freaked out, and he won't. He's like, I don't know if he's with Chad right now or what he's doing, but he won't. I think.
Well,
he's
in all
he's
seriousness,
completely
and
nuts.
this makes for an awkward segue, there was actually a pretty intense tornado in Nashville. I don't know if you heard that. Matt Cram brings that up. Thank you for reminding us. Not sure, honestly, if Chad's okay. We need to find out. But we do need to pray for the now, all the families of the now 22 people that died in Nashville. But again, right? I mean, there's just, every time you get in your car, there isn't a single person, myself included, that one little multiplying cancer cell and I'm gone. I think of Nabil Qureshi, this incredible man of God that was being used in the whole area of apologetics and to the Muslim world. And this cancer comes and that's it. His time's up. We just don't know. And so, we need to pray for those in Nashville. We need to pray for all those whose will end today. And we need to live as if it's true, because it is. Rachel says that Chad marked himself as safe, so that's good to know. But
that's good. I think for me, Ben, that's the biggest takeaway from this conversation and the issues we're facing today is the aspect of perspective. It's do I have the right perspective of my life, of what God's called me to, of the world and the situation of the world around us? And it's funny, like earlier on in the conversation, you brought up World War II. And there are aspects of that story that I love learning from. And there's this recent film they did on Churchill called The Darkest Hour. Well, recent, last year. But one aspect about that moment that I'd never really understood or realized was how close the UK government was to signing a peace treaty with Hitler.
Yeah.
And the big difference that Churchill brought in when he came in as a prime minister was perspective. He understood what was happening and what was at stake, and he wasn't just trying to find the easiest, most comfortable solution or option to take in the moment of crisis. He was going, look, this is the reality of what we're living in, and we've got to live according to it, or fight according to it. And so he said, "There's no way you can make peace with the tyrant or with what's going on right now." And that would have changed everything in history. And it was simply a matter of perspective. The prime minister before him was just going like, "Oh, it'd just be a lot easier if we try to make some peace here." And of course, it would have been a temporary solution
that
for something
weasel,
way worse. And
Neville Chamberlain.
Yeah. Exactly. And it really speaks to me in terms of, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, do I really get the right perspective? That's why I'm saying it's the biggest takeaway for me from the conversation is, do I have the right perspective that we are in crisis all the time, coronavirus or none, and our lives are fragile, like you've been saying, Ben, and we need to live. Tom said this in the comments right there. We need to live as if it's our last day. That's really, I think, what the gospel calls us to do. And it sounds radical, and we probably don't always live it out. But I think that the biblical perspective is that, to say this is last times, we should be sharing the gospel. We should be loving people no matter what the context and the situation, and being bold for Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for all of you who joined us in the live stream. Sorry we didn't get to all of your comments. I agree. Let's not bring YOLO or emo back. I don't know. I was listening to some emo music, some of that kind of early mid 2000s era. There was some good lyrics there. Kind of some of the stuff today is kind of anyway. Now I'm sounding old. Okay, boomer. Anyway, we're gonna end it now. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. Go ahead and join our Provoke and Inspire podcast community group. It's a great group. We have lots of good discussions, request access. It shall be granted. And then you will be put into these conversations. Well, maybe not physically or forcibly. You can join them. And it's a great way to engage. Otherwise, thank you for listening. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Peace.